13-year-old Max Werenka wasn't your typical teenager. While others obsessed over video games and social media, Max found solace in the quiet hum of the natural world. He had a shock of unruly brown hair that perpetually fell into his intense, curious blue eyes, eyes that always seemed to be searching, questioning. He wasn't athletic, preferring the company of dusty science books and his ever-growing collection of rocks and minerals to team sports. He possessed a quiet bravery, a willingness to venture where others wouldn't, fueled by an insatiable thirst for knowledge. He wasn't afraid to be different. He embraced it. Max lived a simple life. His parents, John, a freelance photographer, and Sarah, a part-time librarian, fully support his interest. They are the type of parents that always encourage their kids to explore and question, and they found Max's curiosity is some kind of a bless. Max has no sibling, so he often spent time alone, and with that, make him even more attracted to nature and science. Max's adventurous spirit didn't just appear out of nowhere. A couple years ago, a local newspaper wrote an article about him when he used his self-made compass and map to discover a rare type of flower, which was considered to be extinct in that area. And in another occasion, Max once built a small raft to cross a creek to examine a strange rock formation on the other side. Griffin Lake was more than just a body of water. It was a living entity, a shimmering sapphire jewel nestled in the embrace of the Canadian Rockies. Sunlight danced on its surface, creating an ethereal, almost otherworldly glow. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, a primal aroma that spoke of ancient secrets. Towering evergreens, sentinels of the wilderness, guarded the shores, their reflections mirrored perfectly in the still, deep water. Whispers of local legends clung to the lake like morning mist, tales of a serpentine creature lurking in the depths, of vanished prospectors, and of treasures lost to time. It was a place where the veil between reality and myth felt thin. The lake teemed with life. Cutthroat trout darted through the shallows, their scales flashing silver. Ospreys circled overhead, their sharp cries echoing across the water. Along the shoreline, thickets of willow and alder provided shelter for smaller creatures. Long before the tourists and cabins, the Shawapam people called this land home. Their stories, woven into the landscape, spoke of respect for the lake and its power. Then came the fur traders, the gold seekers, each leaving their mark, their whispers adding to the lake's mystique. The Werenka's family cabin was a place of rustic charm. Built with thick cedar logs, it blended seamlessly with its surroundings. Inside, a large stone fireplace dominated the living room, promising warmth on chilly evenings. Wide windows offered breathtaking views of the lake, framing it like a living masterpiece. The smell of wood smoke and pine needles always hung in the air, a comforting scent that Max associated with countless family gatherings, board games played by the fire, and his father's tall tales. This cabin held all of family's precious memory for years. The stranger arrived on a Tuesday, a day that began like any other, yet would soon unravel into something extraordinary. He introduced himself as Mr. Arthur Sterling, a writer seeking solitude for his work, and rented one of the family's cabins. He was a man of perhaps 50, with a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard and eyes that held a hint of weariness, a subtle melancholy. He wore a worn tweed jacket and carried a battered leather satchel that seemed to contain the weight of untold stories. Max, ever observant, noticed the way Mr. Sterling's gaze kept drifting towards the lake, a flicker of unease in his expression. Something about him felt off. Before Mr. Sterling arrived, Max spent that morning exploring the woods near the cabin. He collected few samples of rock near the shore, categorized them neatly into his notebook. He also spotted a rare blue bird and quickly wrote down every detail of it. Max first encountered Mr. Sterling down by the small wooden dock his father had built. The man was staring out at the water, his shoulders slumped, a sigh escaping his lips that was almost swallowed by the vastness of the lake. He seemed lost in thought, miles away. That evening, as the family shared a simple meal with Mr. Sterling, the conversation remained polite, surface level. But as darkness crept in, and the fire crackled merrily, Mr. Sterling shifted in his chair, his gaze drawn once more to the window and the inky blackness of the lake beyond. "There's something out there," he murmured almost to himself, his voice barely a whisper. "Something I saw. I can't quite explain it." The next morning, the remnants of Mr. Sterling's unease lingered in the air like wood smoke. He recounted his sighting with more detail, yet his words were laced with hesitation. "It was large," he explained, his hands gesturing vaguely, "and dark. Submerged. Just a glimpse, really, beneath the surface. But different. Not a log, not a rock. Something metallic." He shook his head, a troubled frown creasing his forehead. Max, his curiosity now a burning flame, pressed him for more. He peppered Mr. Sterling with questions. Where exactly had he seen it? How deep was the water? What shape was it? The older man struggled to provide concrete answers, his memory fragmented and uncertain. Max, however, was undeterred. He proposed a plan. They would go out on the lake, using paddleboards, and try to relocate the object. Mr. Sterling, initially reluctant, eventually agreed, a mixture of apprehension and a strange, compelling curiosity in his eyes. Perhaps it was the boy's infectious enthusiasm, or perhaps it was a deeper, unspoken need to confront the unsettling mystery. Max spent some time trying to pursue Mr. Sterling. He listed out many reasons. He even drew a map and a plan for their exploration. They prepared meticulously, gathering their equipment. 2 sturdy paddleboards, life vests, a pair of snorkeling masks, and a waterproof bag for Max's small but surprisingly powerful digital camera. The sun was climbing higher, casting long shadows across the water, which was now shimmering with a gentle, inviting ripple. As they pushed off from the shore, Max felt a thrill course through him, a mixture of excitement and a prickle of fear. He glanced at Mr. Sterling, who paddled with a determined, if somewhat stiff, stroke. They reached the area Mr. Sterling had indicated, a section of the lake where the water deepened considerably, the bottom dropping away into an inky abyss. They took turns peering through the masks, their faces submerged, searching the depths. The water was surprisingly clear, but the sunlight only penetrated so far. Below them, the world was a muted, shadowy realm, filled with swaying weeds and darting fish. They saw nothing unusual. Frustration began to mount. The wind picked up, creating choppy waves that made it difficult to maintain their position. Max nearly lost his balance several times. Visibility worsened as sediment was stirred up from the bottom. Max's fingers, numbed by the cold water, fumbled with his mask. He was about to suggest they give up when Mr. Sterling suddenly cried out, pointing a trembling finger towards a darker patch of shadow below. Max and Mr. Sterling returned to the cabin, defeated. While Mr. Sterling started to doubt what he saw, Max's curiosity grew even stronger. They spent the afternoon on the internet, searching for any record of accident or anything that can relate it to a big, dark, submerged object in the lake. But most of the result was about the minivan accident in 2009, which Max knew for sure that it was not what they saw. The only lead was an old, nearly faded-out news article talking about a mysterious disappearance years ago. Max's uncle, Robert, a seasoned police officer with the local detachment, arrived for a visit. Robert was a man of quiet strength, his presence reassuring. He listened patiently as Max, his voice brimming with excitement, recounted the events of the past 2 days. Robert, however, remained skeptical. He reminded Max about the minivan incident, assuming it was the likely explanation. But then, a flicker of memory crossed his face. "Wait a minute," he said, frowning. "That minivan was recovered years ago. It couldn't be the same thing." A new wave of determination washed over Max. The mystery had deepened, and he wouldn't rest until he had answers. Armed with his GoPro, Max was ready for a second attempt. He meticulously checked the battery, the memory card, and the waterproof housing. He chose a time when the sun was directly overhead, maximizing visibility underwater. He slipped into the cold water, the shock sending a shiver down his spine. He adjusted his mask, took a deep breath, and dove. The underwater world enveloped him, a realm of muted greens and blues, of swaying weeds and darting fish. The pressure increased in his ears as he descended, the silence broken only by the rhythmic sound of his own breathing. He followed the contours of the lake bed, his eyes scanning the gloom. And then he saw it. Through the GoPro's lens, the unmistakable shape of a car emerged from the shadows. It was dark, covered in a thick layer of algae, resting on its roof at a precarious angle. The windows were dark, like vacant eyes staring out into the watery void. A thrill of discovery, mixed with a sudden chill of unease, ran through him. He circled the vehicle, filming every detail. The make and model, barely discernible. The license plate, almost completely obscured, the damage to the bodywork. He tried to peer inside, but the darkness was impenetrable. A sudden movement caught his eye. A long, sinuous weed wrapped around the car's antenna, swaying eerily in the current. He almost entangled himself. He checked his air, realizing he was running low. With a final, lingering shot, he kicked towards the surface, his heart pounding. Max burst through the surface. Gasping for air, the image of the submerged car burned into his mind. He scrambled back onto his paddleboard, his hands trembling with a mixture of excitement and a growing sense of dread. He immediately showed the footage to his uncle, Robert. The older man's initial skepticism vanished as he watched the grainy, underwater images. His eyes widened, his jaw tightened. The reality of the situation sunk in. This was no discarded minivan. This was something far more significant and potentially far more sinister. Robert wasted no time. He contacted the local police station, his voice firm and authoritative, relaying Max's discovery and demanding immediate action. The initial response was hesitant, tinged with disbelief. After all, it was just a kid with a GoPro, claiming to have found a car at the bottom of the lake. But Robert's insistence, coupled with the undeniable evidence of the video, eventually convinced them. The wheels of officialdom began to turn. A team of police divers, accompanied by a tow truck equipped with a heavy-duty winch, arrived at the lake. The atmosphere was tense, charged with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The divers, clad in their black wetsuits and equipped with advanced underwater communication gear, prepared for their descent. They were professionals accustomed to dealing with submerged vehicles, but there was an unusual gravity to this operation, a sense of entering the unknown. Using Max's video as a guide, they quickly located the car. It was resting precariously on a steep slope, partially buried in silt and sediment. The divers carefully attached heavy-duty straps to the vehicle's undercarriage, working with practiced efficiency in the murky depths. It was a delicate operation. One wrong move could send the car tumbling further into the abyss. The winch on the tow truck whirred to life, the cable tightening with a groan. Slowly, inch by inch, the car began to rise from its watery grave. The water around it churned, clouds of silt billowing up, obscuring the view. The tension on the cable increased, the engine of the tow truck straining under the load. There was a sudden, sharp crack. One of the straps had snapped. The divers signaled frantically, and the winching stopped abruptly. A collective gasp went up from the onlookers gathered on the shore. The divers descended again, working quickly to reattach the strap, reinforcing it with additional lines. The winching resumed, even slower this time, more cautiously. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the dark shape of the car broke the surface. Water cascaded from its rusted frame, a torrent of mud and debris. It was a haunting sight, a relic of the past, resurrected from the depths, carrying with it the secrets of a long-forgotten tragedy. The car, a battered black 1986 Honda Accord, was slowly pulled onto the shore. The police immediately cordoned off the area, establishing a perimeter. The air was thick with anticipation and a growing sense of dread. As the divers carefully pried open the driver's side door, a collective gasp rippled through the small crowd. The interior of the car was a tableau of decay, a grim reminder of the passage of time. And there, amidst the silt and debris, were the skeletal remains of the driver. The discovery sent a shockwave through everyone present. This was no longer just a recovery operation. It was a crime scene. The forensic team moved in, meticulously documenting every detail, collecting evidence with painstaking care. They found a wallet containing a driver's license and a few faded photographs. The name on the license, Janet Ferris. The date of birth, 1922. She had been missing since the fall of 1992, a cold case that had haunted the local community for almost 3 decades. The photographs showed a smiling woman, her eyes full of life, a stark contrast to the grim reality before them. The news spread like wildfire. The local radio station interrupted its regular programming to announce the discovery. The story was quickly picked up by national news outlets. Max, watching the events unfold from a distance, felt a complex mix of emotions. A sense of accomplishment, of having solved a long-standing mystery, but also a profound sadness for the woman who had perished in such a tragic way. He had brought closure, but at a heavy cost. The police contacted Janet Ferris's family, delivering the news they had long dreaded, but also, in a way, hoped for. The closure, though painful, was a relief after decades of uncertainty. The Ferris family, contacted by the authorities, arrived at Griffin Lake. They were a small group: Janet's son, now a middle-aged man himself, his wife, and their 2 teenage children. They stood on the shore, their faces etched with a mixture of grief and a strange sense of relief. Decades of wondering, of imagining the worst, had finally come to an end. They met with Robert, and then with Max, Janet's son, whose name was David, extended a hand to Max, his eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You have no idea what this means to us. We finally know. We can finally lay her to rest." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of unspoken sorrow and unanswered questions. A small, private memorial service was held near the lake, a simple gathering to honor Janet's memory. David spoke about his mother, about her love of life, her kindness, her adventurous spirit. He shared stories that brought both laughter and tears. It was a moment of closure, a chance to say goodbye. For Max, the experience was transformative. He had set out on a simple adventure, driven by curiosity, and had stumbled upon something far greater, something that touched the lives of others in a profound way. He had faced his fears, persevered through challenges, and ultimately brought solace to a grieving family. He realized the power of observation, the importance of asking questions, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. He learned that even the smallest actions, fueled by a genuine desire to understand, could have a ripple effect, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. He became, in a way, a local hero, though he never sought the attention. He continued to frequent school, but he was different after what happened. He knew he would continue to explore, question, and discover. The news of Max's discovery spread throughout the community. The local newspaper ran a front-page story, hailing him as a young hero. Social media buzzed with comments, praising his bravery and his determination. His classmates and teachers at school looked at him with a newfound respect. He received letters and emails from people he had never met, thanking him for bringing closure to the Janet Ferris case. But the story of Griffin Lake didn't end there. It lingered in the air, a reminder of the secrets that lie hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered. Questions remained, unanswered, and perhaps unanswerable. What had caused Janet Ferris to drive into the lake? Was it an accident? A deliberate act? The truth, like the depths of the lake itself, remained shrouded in mystery. Max, standing on the shore of Griffin Lake, looked out at the tranquil water. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the surface. He knew that this place, this lake, would forever hold a special significance for him. It was a place of beauty, of mystery, and of a profound connection to the past. He wondered what other secrets the lake might hold, what other stories were waiting to be told. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his heart, that his adventures were far from over. He smiled and took a deep breath, ready for anything.